Welcome to the legend behind Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast. Iron Maiden's third album, The Number of the Beast, was released in March 1982. It reached number 1 in the UK and placed 33 on US Billboard. Okay, in this episode I want to discuss the things that never get discussed about Iron Maiden's breakthrough album. How in effect, Number of the Beast was really a recording disaster, a promotional disaster, eventually a financial disaster, and how Bruce Dickinson's arrival was not as perfect as it might have been painted. Disclaimer, though I've researched this band and album extensively, there are certain comments I shall make that are my assumptions and my assumptions only based on the aforesaid research. Okay, let's talk about the promotional disaster first. Though publicly denying it, Iron Maiden had a secret plan to break America. And it started with The Number of the Beast. And it was mainly done through the sterling efforts of manager Rod Smallwood. But all his hard work got royally screwed at the very last minute. Steve Harris has often been quoted as saying that Iron Maiden had no plans to break America, that the US would either like them or they wouldn't. That's not true. They had a major plan set up. Smallwood knew that he had to get their US label Capitol on side for essential promotion because the radio wasn't going to happen. So he went on a charm offensive with Capitol president Don Zimmerman, and he was supported by an A&R guy called Bruce Ravid, probably mispronounced. All three of them sat down and formulated a 5-year plan for Iron Maiden to break the States. It was centred on a yearly release schedule and a brutal touring schedule to support it. Plus, wildly ambitious merchandising and marketing, mostly centering around Eddie, who Smallwood wanted to elevate into a readily identifiable icon. With this blueprint, Smallwood visited every single one of Capitol's 12 regional offices across the states to sell the plan at a grassroots level. As I said, it was a charm offensive and it worked. As one record label executive stated, quote, "Long before Maiden set foot here, there were thousands of people who wanted to be part of breaking them in America." End quote. So the groundwork had been done. All they needed was a fantastic record to start things off. Well, the band undoubtedly supplied that. So what went wrong? 2 stupid mistakes that blew it. Big time. An insanely inappropriate cover and stupid lyrics to one song that idiotically they made the title track and released as the second single. Taken together, it seems that Iron Maiden had become Satanists. Steve Harris stated, quote, "It was mad. They completely got the wrong end of the stick. They obviously hadn't read the lyrics." End quote. Well, if you don't want them to get the wrong end of the stick, Steve, don't have a cover with Eddie using the devil as his sock puppet. And if you don't want them to take it seriously, don't lift verbatim from the Book of Revelations. And if you don't want them to take it seriously, don't make the most memorable chorus on the album 666, The Number of the Beast. And don't then entitle the album The Number of the Beast. The social conservatives and the Bible Belt in America don't do irony, Steve. It was made even worse by The Number of the Beast being released right at the height of the early 80s satanic panic in the States. And they certainly went to town on that record. They burnt the album. They smashed the album. In Arkansas, they even wanted the album to carry stickers warning of its evil, satanic nature. For me, the highlight of all this came 2 years later when disgraced evangelist Jimmy Swaggart published his book, the catchily entitled Music, the New Pornography, and on the book's cover there was actually a picture of Steve Harris. Now people say, no, but all publicity surely is good publicity. And if they were burning the record, at least they were buying it. But that's just a fraction of the sales that they lost. I mean, the Bible Belt alone covers, wait for it, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Carolina, North and South, Louisiana, Kentucky, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Virginia. And that's just for starters. And then take into account any church in any state, anywhere, that has strong conservative Protestant values. There are a lot of them. And when you lose these people, you lose them forever. Once bitten, twice satanised, mate. The cover was a stupid, stupid marketing mistake. A picture, they say, paints 1,000 words, and that cover killed them. Anything would have been better than what they went for. Eddie walking out of a burning building with a machete. Eddie playing poker with assaulted lowlives. Eddie sitting astride a motorbike, careering across the desert. Even Eddie buggering Dave Murray would have made for a less controversial cover. And calling the album The Number of the Beast and writing a song with that title, I mean, they got what they deserved. And though Iron Maiden might have been complaining about all this satanic stuff when it kicked off in the States, hypocritically Iron Maiden had milked it before the album came out, with the so-called studio spookings. I mean, it seems that while recording Number of the Beast, the studio lights would go off and on for no reason. That the recording equipment would inexplicably break down, and that the band's gear would groan. I mean, seriously, groan. And then producer Martin Birch crashed his car driving home from the studios where they had been working on the title track itself. Well, it would have to be, wouldn't it? He crashed into a van, but not just any van, a van full of nuns. And then the driver of the van got out and started praying in the middle of the road, and that the bill for the repairs came to 666, which supposedly terrified poor Martin to the extent that he refused to pay until the bill had been increased to 667. Stupid. Short-sighted. With a different cover and different lyrics to one track, Number of the Beast would probably have broken top 10 in the States. And the knock-on effect of that for future album sales would have been unbelievable, especially as Maiden were about to embark on their golden period. As it was, it took them over 20 years to get an album into the US top 10. 2006 is A Matter of Life and Death, which I believe crawled in at number 9. But even colossally stupid marketing pales into insignificance when it comes to the track that eventually cost Steve Harris well over £1 million. Hallowed Be Thy Name. For many, the standout song on the album and a live favourite. But let's start at the beginning. Steve Harris in his youth had been a big fan of a London band called Beckett. He went to their gigs, he bought their albums. Nothing wrong with that. Where it all starts to get a bit dodgy is when Harris deliberately lifted 2 complete verses from the Beckett track, Life's Shadow, and used them in Hallowed Be Thy Name, claiming that they were his own work. Now, Life's Shadow had been written by 2 people, Robert Barton and Brian Quinn. It didn't take too long before Mr. Barton cottoned onto this rip-off and told Steve Harris he was going to sue him for £200,000 for copyright breach. Harris, although still presumably claiming the material to be his own, weirdly decided to pay Mr. Barton £200,000 rather than go to court. Now, at the time, Mr. Barton failed to disclose to Steve that it was co-writer Brian Quinn who had actually written the lyrics that Harris stole. So Harris had in effect paid the wrong guy £200,000 to presumably just keep his mouth shut. And we all know how that works. Later down the road, someone's mouth opened. Brian Quinn found out, and he, plus a smiling Mr. Barton, came back for a second and much bigger bite. This time, both of them suing Harris for copyright breach. Because Harris always lied, that the lyrics were his own, he had been able to enjoy the considerable publishing income from Hallowed Be Thy Name for many, many years. But now he was finally buggered. As a lame excuse, he changed his story, admitting he stole the lyrics, but recorded the track with the said lyrics only as a guide, and that the band had always planned to re-record the track with different lyrics, but never got round to it because of a lack of time. Again, Harris settled out of court, and this time it cost the band nearly £1 million. Unbelievable. Harris's lame, or as I like to call it, totally made up, excuse about not re-recording Hello Be Thy Name due to lack of time in the studio brings me on to my next point of discussion. The accredited story with The Number of the Beast is that Iron Maiden struggled to record the album in the 5 weeks they spent at Battery Studios. The reason given is that for the first time ever, they had to write all the material from scratch. And they really made a real song and dance about this. Steve Harris, quote, "We put ourselves purposefully under pressure. We only allowed ourselves a specific period of time for writing." End quote. Another quote, "We didn't have any material. The pressure really was on big time. Not only did we have a new singer, but we also had to come up with the goods to come out with a really strong album with completely new material." End quote. Another quote, "We just about had enough time to do what we did, and that was it." End quote. Okay, Steve, yeah, we get the picture. But under scrutiny, does it add up? Let's examine all these brand new songs. Okay, is Invaders a new song? No. Invaders on the album is a rehash of an old song called Invasion. Is Children of the Damned a new song? No. Iron Maiden were playing Children of the Damned on the final dates of the 1981 Killer Tour with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. Okay, well, surely The Prisoner is a new song. No. Iron Maiden were also playing The Prisoner live on the final dates of the 1981 Killer Tour with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. All right, not to worry, we are going to find one. Is Running Free a new song? Yes. No. Iron Maiden were also playing Running Free on the final dates of the 1981 Killer Tour with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. This is getting embarrassing. Surely we will find one in a minute. So, is Hello Be Thy Name a new song? No. Iron Maiden were also playing Hello Be Thy Name in their live set on the final dates of the 1981 Killers Tour with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. All right. We're going to go for this one more time. We're going to go again. Is 22 Acacia Avenue a new song? Nope. In fact, that song is so old, it's actually Wearing Slippers. Adrian Smith wrote that in his former band Urchin, where it was originally called Countdown. And yes, of course, it was also in the live set on the final dates of the 1981 Killer Tour with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. All right, look. We'll just cut to the chase. There are actually two. In 5 weeks, in the studio, working according to Steve Harris, flat out, Iron Maiden wrote 2 new songs. The Number of the Beast and Gangland. And they didn't even like Gangland. Seriously, the band generally believed that Total Eclipse, the B-side to Run to the Hills, was a stronger track and should have been on the album. In fact, they felt so strongly about it that when Maiden released a vinyl edition of The Number of the Beast to celebrate its 40th anniversary, they actually replaced Gangland with Total Eclipse. So what were they doing? What the hell were they doing in the studio? Harris, quote, "The weird thing is that all of the material was written in a 2 to 3 week period." Not weird really, Steve. I mean, you only had 2 songs to write. The only weird thing is it took you so bloody long. Add to that the fact that Bruce Dickinson stated that they were so rushed recording that album that they even forgot to mix the guitar solos on Gangland. What the hell was going on? Well, I suppose what with the studio lights constantly going on and off, and their equipment growling at them, intermittently, one supposes, the band were either collapsed in a strobe-induced state of inertia or working hard in a 5-man chain gang throwing buckets of holy water onto the mixing desk and amplifiers. Absolute joke. And it gets worse. The album ran so late, they had to do a 20-date UK tour promoting a record that hadn't even been released. In fact, they had nothing to promote except the single, Run to the Hills. You know, the one that came out with the wrong B-side. Okay, now let's talk about the arrival of Bruce Dickinson. Now, people only usually comment on the many plus points of Dickinson's arriving, and there were many. But there were also other things that nobody talks about, because Dickinson's arrival totally changed the band dynamics of Iron Maiden, and for one man, this wasn't for the better. Before Dickinson, Steve Harris had enjoyed total control over Iron Maiden. Paul Di'Anio had, how shall we say, other interests. Adrian Smith had only recently joined. Clive Burr, well, he was the drummer, for Christ's sake. And let's face it, Dave Murray knew he was bloody lucky to have the gig in the first place. But Dickinson was a very different animal. Dickinson's ego generally walked into a room 5 minutes before he did. And that quickly became a problem for Steve Harris. But you have to give credit to Bruce, because he laid it all out before he even auditioned. When Rod Smallwood asked Dickinson if he would try out for the role of singer after Samson played the Reading Festival in '81, he received this broadside. First of all, if I do the audition, I'm going to get the job. So you need to figure out whether or not you want me on board, because I don't want to be unless I can be a pain in the arse and have some opinions. I'm not going to be like the other guy. I'm going to have disagreements with Steve because I've got ideas about how I want to change things around. So if you don't want that, you better tell me now. End broadside. Cards on the table. At the audition, they told him to learn 4 songs. Dickinson learned them all. One of the songs he sang was Remember Tomorrow, and I quote from Bruce, "I added a few things, but they were just things that should have been there anyway." End quote. Ooh, ouch. Watch out, Steve. Now, when Dickinson joined Maiden, they were still promoting Killers, and they had a few Italian dates left and then a couple of UK dates. The minute they got on the road, things kicked off between Harris and Dickinson. The flamboyant Dickinson generally liked to be the centre of attention, and never more so than when he was on stage. When he was singing, centre of the stage was his. Harris, though, had always run roughshod live, careering around like a combination of singer cum lead guitarist, believing the entire stage was there for the taking. So on the smaller Italian stages that they were playing, he would constantly, repeatedly, smash Dickinson's microphone out of his hands or smash it up into his mouth with the head of his bass guitar, when both were vying for centre spot. And neither would give ground. Literally, it got so bad that it's rumoured they almost came to blows. And this acute rivalry never went away. There are stories that after the shooting of the video for the track Number of the Beast itself, Harris reputedly ended up screaming at Rod Smallwood, quote, "He goes, he's got to go," end quote. Harris himself put it rather more diplomatically. Quote, "The first year with Bruce was particularly complicated. He absolutely wanted to question my position within the band." End quote. You don't say. Okay, on to the album itself. On previous album Killers, the songs had been awkward, they'd been cumbersome. But, and I feel primarily with Bruce Dickinson's influence, all the songs in The Number of the Beast flow. He ironed out Harris's rough edges. Because Dickinson, though he may have had an ego, he had the talent to back it up. Not only did he have fantastic vocal range and technique, he was also a gifted songwriter with superb commercial instincts. He began collaborating on material with Harris immediately and was definitely heavily involved in writing Children of the Damned, The Prisoner and Run to the Hills. He got no songwriting credit due to ongoing contractual issues with his former band, Samson. Dickinson rightly called his songwriting efforts for the album his moral contribution. I mean, his influence can't be overstated. He brought a sense of theatricality and emotional depth to material that had been missing both. Hallowed Be Thy Name particularly highlights this. It's Maiden's first epic track and for me the most important on the record. Hallowed Be Thy Name is the earliest indication of the unique musical identity that Maiden would develop over succeeding albums. For me, this album is very nearly all killer. It's light years ahead of the previous album. Just one track lets it down, and that's the lead-off track, Invaders. As Harris rightly stated, it's not a bad song, but it just doesn't stand up to the rest of the album. Exactly. Rolling Stone magazine placed Number of the Beast at number 4 on the greatest metal albums of all time, even though the magazine's initial review of the album was scathing. It is a great record. And ironically, when The Number of the Beast was finished, only Martin Birch realised just what they had accomplished. Quote, "I have the same feeling on The Number of the Beast as when we did the Deep Purple album, Machine Head." Well, no higher praise. Okay, so where would I place Number of the Beast in Maiden's 17 album back catalogue? Well, having said all that, it's still not their best, but it is their most important. So taking that into consideration, I would place it 4th. Okay. Smash a like, leave a comment, and please subscribe because it all helps with my fungal infections.